Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to part 2 now of this tutorial on how to fly the Quality Wing 757. This particular one is the 757-200 model. Nice little outside view real quick here while we start the video. As I mentioned in the first video, I fly for V-Delta Airlines, so I'm flying a Delta livery today. That's what the plane looks like from the outside. Back to the cockpit, and we're coming up on the top of our descent. As you can see right here, we're about 47 nautical miles from the top of our descent. If I go to my EFIS and zoom out, you can see we're approaching that right here, where I'm zoomed out to 40 nautical miles. So we're coming up on it right now. So I just wanted to start at that point and show you kind of what I do on my descent. Now again, this is without air traffic control directions or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to the 2D cockpit real quick. Just it's a little easier to do it. And make sure that we adjust our altitude. I'm gonna bring it down to about 5,000. And the reason for that is that'll give me, I'm going to need to be about 3,000 feet up. The altitude of Atlanta is roughly about 1,000 feet above sea level. So if I'm at about 3,000, 3,500 or so, I'll go with 3,500. So for now, we'll just make it 5,000. And so because it's about 1,000 feet above sea level, 3,000 feet would actually put me 2,000 feet above the grade, above the ground. So hold on one second here. Sorry about that, everybody. Had to take a quick phone call. The missus was calling, or the girlfriend. So anyways, what was I in the middle of talking about here? Okay, yeah, so we set this at 5,000, and obviously we're not selecting anything yet. The VNAV, once we cross over the top of descent, will automatically start our descent into Atlanta. Now, at that time, once we've started the descent, I will actually shut off VNAV, and I'll actually control my vertical speed and altitude manually, as well as my speed. It's just a little easier for me. You can, if you leave VNAV on, depending on what altitude you have it set at, it will bring you down to that altitude and level off at that altitude. And the speed will be adjusted based on your altitude restrictions, which if we go back in here, you can go, we're in the cruise section right now. If you go to the third page, that's your descent page. So end of descent altitude is set at 14,000. And then that's at the dirty intersection. And the target speed at that point would be 0.81 Mach. 296, so you can adjust that if you want in here and keep your VNAV on, but I like to keep my altitude and my speed and everything manually, or do that manually. So it's a little easier to do and keep up after. You don't have to worry about it leveling off, and then you forget to bring it down to a better altitude. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Until we're about like maybe 40 nautical miles out. I'm actually going to bring it up to about 10,100, and the reason for that, say 10,300. The reason for that is so that we can actually keep our speed up over 250 knots for a little while. Then once we get about, like, maybe I would say like 30, 40 miles out, I will drop it down to the 3,500 or the 3,000. Actually, I think it was 3,500 that I wanted to be at, or 3,700 or so. And so we'll bring it down to that altitude at that time. Also, at this point, we should set our speed brakes, or auto brakes, I should say. Now, the closer you get to max auto, the less time or the less distance it takes for the plane to slow down on the runway using the auto brakes. Now, this particular runway that we're about to land on, I believe it's I think it's 10,000 feet long. Might be a little bit longer than that. So we don't really need an incredibly large amount of space. So I'm going to stick with 2 on my auto brakes. Now, we're also going to be using the spoiler or speed brake during our descent. So once we start descending, we will do that. But until then, let's make sure we turn our seatbelt signs back on. We'll have an announcement here as soon as we hit the top of our descent, telling everybody to get back in their seats.
The captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Please check that your seatbelt is securely fastened. To prepare for landing, it will be necessary to collect all service items, as well as any other items you wish to discard, such as newspapers.
Okay, so now everybody's returning to their seats, getting themselves all buckled up for our descent into Atlanta. I like to be nice and zoomed in on my controls during the descent so that I can control everything relatively with ease. Not have to worry about having to zoom in and out a bunch of different times. I can have access to my flaps. I can change the auto brakes from here as well, which are right below this, but everything else is easily accessible. And I've got all my instruments up here again, or my displays up here again, just so it's a little easier for you to see. I mean, if I didn't have it up, you can see I would probably be more like this, so that I can see both displays while I was also monitoring my autopilot settings. But like I said, for now, we'll make sure that these are up. Probably should put that one up first. There we go. So we've started our descent. Obviously, once we get below 18,000 feet, we're going to reset our altimeter setting to the local setting, which in this case, all you have to do is just hit B as in Bravo, on your keyboard, and that will adjust it to the local setting automatically for you. Now, you could switch to your descent phase, it will automatically do it for you. You don't have to actually change this at all. But this is like your switches to change your engine settings to various things, but it's automatically set for you in this particular, the way I have it set up right now, so which is the default setting. So we're coming in kind of on the fast side. We're at about 307 knots, and that's an airspeed. That's an indicated airspeed. So because we want to be, I want to bring it down to about 275. So we're going to shut our VNAV off. I'm going to bring this up to 2,000 or 2,000 feet per minute for our vertical speed, and we're going to click on vertical speed. I don't know why it does that too. Sometimes it just switches it back to a relative amount, but the LNAV is still on, so it's still going to go through our flight pattern as filed or as listed. So that being the case, I don't need to worry about my heading or anything, at least not yet. So even though it's, my heading indicator is at 237 right now, I don't have the heading hold switch on right now. So it's still flying on LNAV. So I'm going to hit the slash to throw our spoilers down. As you can see, it's going to bring our speed down. hear it when it kicks in. The audio too on these 757s are awesome. They actually, I read about it. Apparently, they had one of these planes in a giant airplane hangar that was all mic'd up for sound, and they literally went through the entire phase, all phases of the engine, from idle to max throttle, and everything in between, to reverse thrusters, and to also arming the speed brake during, so you can hear it, like the engines are being spoiled by the speed brake. So pretty interesting. But so anyways, what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring this down to 275, and during this descent, obviously you can keep an eye on your altitude. We've got an altitude set of 10,300, 10,300, and once we get a little bit closer to the airport, I'm going to bring that down. Now, we're still 129 nautical miles out right now, so as we get closer, and this is a cumulative distance based on your flight plan, so our physical distance away from Atlanta may be different than this, but that's the distance that we're going to have to travel on our flight path in order to get to the airport. So that's something to keep in mind, because even though we could be, like, at this point we could be, let's say, 80 nautical miles away from the airport, but we still have to go, if you remember in the first video, we've got to go around the airport in order to reach our, let's shut this off, in order to reach our SID, our STAR, our standard arrival for this airport. And actually, I've got it zoomed out to 40 nautical miles right now. This green arch is going to tell me where, roughly, I'm going to hit my altitude indicated on my autopilot. So, roughly through the Birds intersection or so, I'll be just about hitting my 10,300 mark right there. So that's another way that you can keep an eye on how far it's going to take you to get to a certain altitude. That arch will obviously move closer to me as I get closer to it. And it adjusts based on your speed. So if you bring your speed down or you bring your speed up, that's going to move accordingly. But this dotted line right here is actually the runway heading for 09er left. But actually, as you can see on here, if I put it on the other mode, 09er left would be heading in this direction, towards the left. So we're going to be physically going around the airport. Switch this back here. We're going to be going, this is KATL right here. We're going to go over it and around it, and then once we're on the other side and we're able to line up and grab our localizer for the ILS approach, at that point we'll be shutting off our LNAV and we'll be using our heading selector knob to get us to the appropriate heading, so that we can intercept the localizer. Once we intercept the localizer and we're on the localizer, then we're waiting for our glide slope to be even with our path of flight, and at that point we would hit the approach hold switch, which will put us on the glide slope to touchdown on runway 09er left. So that's how that works. Still descending. Usually the way it works as far as lighting goes, I'll bring up the lighting panel real quick to show you. Obviously you want your seatbelt sign on whenever you're ascending or descending, and you always want all of these positional lights on. You don't need the logo switch on. That one is just a light that illuminates the logo on the tail. But you're going to turn your wing lights and your nose gear lights, your landing lights on anywhere below 10,000 feet. And then once you're off of the runway, you switch off of your landing lights and you turn on your taxi lights. Now, that's just a general rule of thumb. The FAA prefers that all planes flying, all jet airliners flying under the altitude of 10,000 require you to have your landing lights on. So, and then there's also the speed restriction of anything under 10,000 feet. You want to be below 250 knots. So right now we're just cruising along here at the 275 mark. You can see we're still at about 282, which is okay. It's still going to try to push us faster because we're falling. We're not falling, but we're descending at a rate of 2,000 feet per minute. So with the nose pointed that much down, I mean, you can see the nose is pointed below the horizon. You're going to gain speed that way. And as you can see, I've got the speed brake armed or deployed at this point at 100%, and it's still slightly keeping us above the indicated, or the what we have indicated on our panel. What am I doing here? Take that off. Take that off. Now, if you pull up your legs here on your route, you're going to see the distance between each waypoint here. We still have 2 pages of waypoints. So I'm thinking, it's saying on here that we should stay at about 1,400 until we cross the wharf intersection, and then at 1,200 through the Boha intersection. So we would start descending right through after we get through the wharf intersection. But since we're going to go down to about 10,300, once we cross over the Boha intersection, that's when we're going to start our descent down to our we'll say 4,000. I was saying probably about 3,700, 3,800, but we can do 4,000, and we'll maintain 4,000 and probably about 240 or 225 or so knots, just to keep us under that 250 mark. Then once we level off at 4,000, we will disengage the speed brake and arm the speed brake for our touchdown on runway 09 or left. We've already got our frequency set up for our ILS approach and our course heading of 09 or 4. And again, don't forget that you have to make sure that it's also set up on here. Otherwise, it's not going to work for you. So make sure that it's correct on here. This particular ILS frequency is 110.50. So on the overhead here, not the overhead, but on your main display and on the radio stack, you want to make sure that you're at the correct frequency. Otherwise, you could land short. You could wind up not being able to establish yourself on the localizer. And I was talking about VATSIM before, but basically on VATSIM, at this point in time, you would be instructed on what altitudes they want you to be at. They may even give you an indicated altitude for a specific waypoint along your route. So, like, for example, if they wanted me to descend and maintain 1,400, and they wanted me to be at 1,400 through the Birds intersection, I would already be leveled off actually at this point through the Birds intersection. But you want to make sure that you maintain their instructions as closely as possible and as quickly as possible. So that's that. So we're coming up on the Birds intersection right now. Zoom in just slightly. You can see as we get closer, it's easier. You can zoom in. You can kind of see what path we're going to take. I mean, this is the runway right here, going from basically from the top right to the bottom left. That's where we'll be landing. But until we get there, you're gonna, we have to go around the airport basically to get to that 09 or left runway heading. So now you can hear, I'm gonna shut off the speed brake, which you can do manually, or you can do it by pressing the slash button. I'm gonna show you right now too. I'm gonna actually arm the speed brake by hitting shift slash, and that arms it now, so that when we're just above the ground, the speed brake will automatically deploy to 100%. Once we touch down, our auto brakes will kick in, and we will hit F2 to kick in our 25% reverse thrusters. Looks like we're now about to we have now picked up the signal for our localizer, because the localizer has come online. So that actually automatically happens. Once you're within range of the localizer, you'll be able to see the localizer show up on your primary instrument, or your primary flight display. And that's pretty much it for that. So we're leveled off at 10,300. You can see the airplane's having a much easier time maintaining that 275. And we can go back into our information here. Once we cross over the Boha intersection, or Boja, I don't know, however you want to say it. Once we cross over that intersection, we will begin our descent to 4,000, and we'll slow to about 225 knots, and we'll maintain that speed anywhere between 200 and 225. We'll maintain that speed until we are closer to our interception of the localizer, which I will go over once we get to that point. So that's pretty much it. We just passed over the Cosel intersection. We're now, the plane is now orienting itself towards the wharf intersection. And you can see it's all written out here for you on the display. So it's a little easier for you. In fact, you know what? I'm going to move the heading one because it's kind of like in the way. You can't really see it. Plus, we're going to need that to be over towards the 300 ranges, because once we select that, we will select the heading, we'll shut off LNAV, select the heading, and that will put us on our course to intercept the localizer for runway 09 or left. So we're above 10,000 feet. We don't need our landing lights on quite yet until we cross over that Boha intersection, which is only in about 18 nautical miles. So you can see the way I know that. It also gives you a course heading as well. So if you wanted to fly this using your headings as opposed to using your LNAV, it gives you what heading you would need to switch to once you cross over that particular one. So we're going to stay on a 215 heading until we cross over Boha, and that will make a right turn to 275. And then we'll stay on 275 heading through all of these, and then it would be we just crossed over wharf, so it eliminated it. Now we're down to one page for our legs, which is nice. We can see all of our information right here. We will actually come off of this course and go a little bit long, and then we'll take a right once we get past the runway. That gives us enough time to make sure that we're on the glide slope and we don't overshoot the glide slope or undershoot the glide slope. So at that point, we'll actually switch our heading to about 300 or so. I don't know. We'll see when we get there. Okay. So, and see here. I'm going to switch to this view. Take that off. Take that off. You can kind of see a little bit here. Oh, can't really see anything because we're doing some cloud surfing right now. But that's okay. So let's head back to our display here. But I really have a lot of fun flying this particular aircraft. There's a lot more to it than your default aircrafts. And I think I had started mentioning it before that, you know, with VATSIM, you're flying SIDS and stars and very specific routes to and from your, your destination. And that being the case, it's very difficult to use the default flight planner on FSX and utilize that flight planner and then using like the default GPS that comes in all of the default aircraft, because all the default aircraft that come with Flight Simulator X don't have the flight management computer, which is a lifesaver when it comes to navigating. And you can add legs, you can subtract legs, all through the use of the flight management computer. And honestly, you play around with this computer a little bit, and you can tell, you can figure out what everything is. Like the ATC button doesn't do anything, FMC comm doesn't do anything. Everything else is a functionable key. Like if I wanted to eliminate, okay, actually this is a good example of it, and we'll use it. We just crossed the BOHA, so actually what we'll do is we're gonna bring the altitude down to 4,000, starting now. And that being the case, we're going to slow to 225. So we can stay out of the range of the 250. I'm going to hit one time on the flaps once we come down a little bit. I want to make sure that our speed comes down significantly before we start descending, because we're just 200 feet above 10,000, so we don't want to be over speed. We have plenty of time here to get on the correct course. So once I think we pass like this SOAR intersection or the Hespe, I wanted to show you guys kind of how this all works. But I'm going to actually right now deploy our speed brake, and we're going to descend to 4,000. And let's go ahead and hit. I actually hit F7 that time to just hit, once on the flaps 1. And that's going to create a little bit more drag on the aircraft to prevent it from overspeeding. So we're below the 250, below 10,000. And make sure we turn on our landing lights. And we're slowly making our descent to 4,000. And you can adjust your vertical speed, to go through that however fast you want to do it. But let's go ahead and zoom in. Alright, so now we're parallel with the runway, heading in the opposite direction. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my heading mode now, and I'll show you guys real quick how to delete a waypoint. So we're at 275 heading, click on that. Now we're using heading select mode, and we'll stay on that 275 course heading, which was indicated, like I said, right here. 275 is the heading we want to get to these particular waypoints. Let's say we wanted to eliminate the Soder waypoint and just stick with Hespe. We go to route. Go to the next page. Oh, actually, we can do it on the legs, I believe. Click on Hespe, and click on Soder, and see it eliminated the Soder, and then activate it. You just do that. So it completely eliminated that particular waypoint, and because it's the same heading no matter what, so you can just go direct to Hespe as opposed to needing to utilize both waypoints. So, and you can do that, you can make those adjustments if you want on the fly, which is really cool. And like I was saying, it's really fun to be able to sit there and kind of play around with this and figure it all out. Oh, another thing I wanted to show you guys. First of all, we're going to set our flap speed and our approach reference speed to 140. Because we're a little bit lighter now. We've used up some fuel, so all you do is you click on that, it puts it into your display here, and then you click on the flap speed indicator, and it will populate in that field for you. So we're coming down on 4,000 now. We're actually going to slow down a little bit to 200, and as we level off, we're going to disengage our speed brakes again, which we should start leveling off momentarily here. Yep. So I'm going to take off my speed brakes, arm them. We're holding now at 4,000. And there you go. Now you can see the localizer is available, and we're also well above the glide slope. So what we can do now is we can slow it down even more, bring it down to maybe about 160 70 for now. We're going to hit our gear, and bring our gear down, and we're going to bring our flaps out as well, which will significantly slow down the aircraft.
In preparation for landing, please return all seat backs and tray tables to their upright and stowed position. Ensure all portable electronic devices are turned off, and stow all carry-on items. Additionally, footrests and video monitors must be returned to their original position. Thank you.
Flight attendants,
okay.
please be seated for arrival.
So now you can see I'm using the heading indicator here to get myself lined up for a course interception for the localizer. That being the case, we're also, since we have our gear down and our flaps are at 100%, we're gonna bring it down to our approach reference speed, which is 140, and we're gonna click on localizer. So at this point, we're now going to intercept this localizer, which is right here. Let's get this as zoomed in as I possibly can. And that's it. That's really it. All we have to do now is wait to intercept this right here. Our flaps aren't completely down yet, so you know what? We'll speed it up just slightly. Otherwise, we'll be in a stall situation, and we don't want to do that. I'm going to speed it up a little bit, and then once we're established on the localizer, the plane will automatically make a right turn to line up with 09er left. Once that happens, we'll be keeping an eye on this little purple triangle right here, and once it reaches the center mark, we'll hit the approach hold switch, which will put us on our glide slope on our final approach to 09er left. So now you can see the plane is making a sharp right turn to establish itself on the localizer. You'll have to pardon me if you hear my dog bark in just a moment. My girlfriend's just getting home from work, so she usually will bark. And let's make sure our flaps are fully out at 30 degrees. You can do that by hitting F8, or you can hit F7 a bunch of times, or you can manually click on it right here on the actual little gauge there. So I'm going to bring this up just slightly. Okay, so the airplane is positioning itself right now to intercept and establish itself on the localizer. Once we are established on the localizer, we actually are established at this point right now, so that's good. And it will make its, minor adjustments and what have you to make sure that it gets right onto that line. That being the case, we no longer need this, and we'll do this. You can still see that we're lined up fine on the localizer. We'll double check and do a quick checklist of making sure everything's all set. Speed brake is armed. Our flaps are 30. Our speed is set for our approach reference speed. We're established on the localizer, and our gear is down. Now we're just waiting to line up with the glide slope, which will be coming up here shortly. And once we do that, we'll click on the approach hold switch, and we'll be making our way down to our final approach into Atlanta. So we're just about there. So you can see right now it has started to move. So right now we're coming up on that spot that will keep us lined up with the glide slope. Once we hit that spot, all you do is hit the autopilot approach mode switch over here, right under where it says LOC. We're already on the LOC right now. And once that happens, the plane will automatically start descending from our 4,000 foot altitude down for an auto land on runway 09er left. This is where you would get your final landing clearance from the tower. But obviously, like I have mentioned from the very beginning, We are not utilizing air traffic control whatsoever. We're just flying this on our own. And we're just above there now, so we're going to hit the approach hold switch. So we're now on the glide slope. And you want to keep this in your view at all times because we're doing an ILS approach right now, which is an instrument landing approach, instrument landing system approach. And this is the only reference that we have to the ground, especially if it's foggy or very cloudy that day, which, as you can see right now, I can't see the airport at all. So the airport's not even in view, and we're already on the glide slope. So we're slowly making our descent on the glide slope. Once we get to about 500 feet or so, I'm going to kill the auto throttle, which is right here. It's kind of a convenient spot for it. You will hear those altitude callouts as well, which is indicated right here. Not based on this altitude. This is the altitude above sea level. This is the actual altitude above the ground. But you want to keep an eye on this. Like right now, we're shooting a little bit of a long approach because we're above the glide slope, but that should correct itself on our way down to our final approach here. That should correct itself. And with this particular runway being a fairly long runway, we shouldn't have to worry about if we land a little long. You should have plenty of room to slow down and stop without running out of runway. So, and that's also important too. Like, we took off from LaGuardia on this particular flight, and LaGuardia has only like a 7,000 foot runway, so you do need to use a significantly more, a significant amount of like speed brakes. You want your speed brakes at max auto or 4, so that you have enough space to slow down. And you definitely need your reverse thrusters. You could almost roll out on this particular runway that we're about to land on. You could almost roll out without even using your reverse thrusters, but you don't want to do that. But you definitely want to use your reverse thrusters at all times. So land 3 you just saw came up here. That's our auto land status. If anything other than land 3 came on here, then you're not set up properly for your final approach. Right now, the plane will land itself, including a flare, which you can see. I'll bring it up again so you can see it. It says glide slope and flare, so it will even flare itself at the end when you're just above the runway. You can see we're just coming into view now of the airport, even though, again, it's a little foggy, a little cloudy, low clouds. Can't really see, where we're supposed to go. You can kind of see it, but you can't really see it. So I'm going to disengage the auto throttle when we get to about 500 feet. And you'll get an alarm, which you can just switch off. It's basically just telling you your auto throttle is off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to wait until we're about 30 feet or so above the ground, and I'm going to bring the throttle down to idle. And then once we touch down, I'm going to press Z to disengage the autopilot. And at that time, I can hit F2 to use our auto, our reverse thrusters. So we're at 500. Shut that off. I've got my hand on F1 so that I can bring the throttle to idle. Still right on the glide slope. We're fine. You can see the runway lights are on.
Approaching minimums. 200.
Okay, see the airplane's going to flare right now.
50.
All right.
40.
I've disengaged
30,
the
20. 10.
Throttle. Nice touchdown. And reverse thrusters. So our auto brakes and our reverse thrusters have kicked in right now. You can see our speeds going way down. That was a little bit of a steep landing. You want to wait maybe just a tad bit longer to kill that throttle, because honestly the throttle will actually, if you kill that throttle too early, it will actually cause you to land a little bit steep, and you want to be a nice, gentle landing when you come down, so something to keep in mind. So now we can use our manual brakes to slow ourselves down to a stop. Or not to a stop, but at least slow enough to be able to turn off the end of the runway onto the taxiway. That's pretty much it. So now I'm going to bring the throttle back to idle, turn off of the runway onto the taxiway, and that's pretty much it. So at this time, you know, I'm not going to show you guys how to taxi to the gate. I mean, you can figure that out on your own. You now know how to fly the Quality Wing 757, and that's pretty much it. I mean, now it's just a matter of just taxiing back to the gate, and that's, you know, something you can probably figure out on your own. But I hope this helps everybody, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Be happy to answer any questions, and if I don't know the answer, I'll try to help you out the best I can. But that's pretty much it. So thanks for joining me, everybody. Have a great day. Enjoy flying the Quality Wing 757, and I'll see you later.